Nostalgia, a feeling you get when you look back at the past, be it pleasure or bittersweet, is cathartic to say the least. It has always been a thing in pop culture, but has become even more prominent in the past 5 years to the point of entering even online discourse. Nostalgia and its connection to the gaming industry is strong because of gaming's connection with its history. It has become a big thing in the industry, with companies trying to monetize it however they can, and gamers having a collective nostalgic sentiment. It has a big factor, not only in the business and community side, but also on how we receive and talk about video games, and I want to talk about both fronts here. Now, this is up for discussion because nostalgia, its connection to pop culture and to gaming, is a nuanced topic, so I would accept any constructive disagreement to what I say. Nostalgia isn't inherently a bad thing, as it can help us appreciate the past for what it is, see the good in those periods, and see that there's something to learn from or strive for. But as it got more prevalent in the online space, it shows some toxic sides. There is a growing sentiment that gaming isn't what it used to be, and the gaming space back then is by far better. Naturally, there isn't anything wrong with viewing a generation as superior over others. I mean, it's an opinion, but when I hear what they say and the points they use, I cannot take that sentiment seriously.
Number 8. New original IPs are literally just Biomutant 5.5 out of 10.
Man, what the fuck is you talking about?
What the fuck was that?
I'm sorry, man. I wasn't thinking about it.
Here's an example. I love Teen Titans Go. It is a show that's very popular in my generation. Everyone loves that show, or so I thought, because apparently people hated TTG when it aired, and the hate was so much that the show had an episode dedicated to addressing the haters. Why? Because it's not like the previous Teen Titans show that aired before it. And this sentiment is common. It's very common when discussing about older games or older generations or criticizing the current trends in gaming. Not only is that annoying due to the ignorant negativity, most especially when we are in a time where they are arguing more good games than ever, but it can be disputed because if you can even make a 5-minute research, you will see that the 8th, 7th, and even the 6th generation had a myriad of problems back then. Apparently, the 7th generation was considered so bad that it was even under discussion as the worst generation of all time. That sounds familiar. It's a lot, so I'll be glossing through them as I go. The PS3 had the terrible launch. The console ran games terribly because Sony was so focused on making the console a supercomputer that they didn't even consider how to make games work on that thing. There's the Red Ring of Death with the Xbox 360 with a failure rate of 54%. The 7th gen pioneered everything that we take for granted nowadays in modern gaming. But that doesn't change the fact that there was an oversaturation of shooter games, terribly licensed IP games were a norm, shovelware was filling the platform, an abundance of GTA clones, Kinect, QuickTime events were splattered in every single game you can think of, even though most of the time is absolutely unnecessary and a lot of times intrusive. Season passes were more common then, and it sparked the debate on its ethics, most especially when there were cases where DLCs were already in the disc before payments, piece filters and grey color grading to copy the quote-unquote realism of movies. That was a thing. In my opinion, it was just a lazy attempt at realism. There was no inherent art direction in this. Multiplayer moves were placed in games that have zero business having one. Developers overusing Bloom as if it will make games more beautiful and more realistic. It did not. The forced westernization of Japanese games in an attempt to appeal to the Western audiences, with Xbox trying too hard to appeal to the casual audience, and last but not the least, the sentiment that the generation just lasted for too long. No generation is truly perfect, and while there are arguably some bad ones, if you ask anyone what their best generation is, it varies wildly based on the age of the person. And guess what? That same sentiment about the current gen of gaming was held during the PS3 games. But I'm sure that if you point out their retort was either they were wrong or it was not as bad as now. I could use that mentality that, yeah, the 7th generation sucks. Despite the PS3's eventual comeback, it was still considered Sony's worst console of all time. But I'm not pointing this out to say that the generation is terrible. I am saying that despite the 7th generation pioneering modern gaming as we know it, it still had problems, it still had controversies. But we look at it as fondly because of the value that generation inherently gives us. And I can say for this gen too, I can mention the good this generation has that we take for granted, like the sheer number of games releasing every year, the increasing variety of games, the indie and AA developers having a renaissance, the fact that crossplay is a thing, how accessible the hobby is, dare I say, rise in quality and standard of games. It may not be as innovative as the PS3 generation, sure, I can admit that, but with the amount of quality games that I am constantly exposed to, it's still a great generation, as long as you ignore the myriad of problems that this generation is going to have. But I digress. Give it enough time, and every generation will be romanticized, even the arguably terrible ones. The sentiment of gaming's downfall due to modernity has happened several times, and every single time it is walked back. There is this cycle that happens every time where the older generations hit on the trends or the behavior of the younger gen, and to be honest, it has to stop. I'm not saying don't criticize modern gaming. Oh, by all means, point those problems out and roast them. But approaching this with a back in my days attitude makes you hate the things that are clearly not made for you. It can make you seem out of touch to the people outside your age group, and there is no end goal other than hating on the game simply because it is quote-unquote different. Shouldn't there be a middle ground? Can't we have nuances critiquing games retrospectively? No, we can't. This is social media, for God's sake. There's no such as nuances. I'm genuinely tired of the older generation fighting the newer gen and being disconnected from reality, convinced that the past is the only good version of reality, and getting mad that gaming isn't giving them the same feeling as they had when they were naive children, when they didn't know better. And there is no way I can take these views seriously. Nostalgia is a profitable market, and who can deny that? I mean, look at the damn numbers here. Companies are aware of that, so they milked it to death. Ports, remasters, reboots, remakes, sequels, classic collections, companies have found ways to profit off it. And sure, some made more than others, Nintendo, and some just use it as an opportunity to milk the life out of a certain game. Leave it to Sony to release a complete collection of a remaster of a 5-year-old game and a remake of a game that had to remaster a year after its release. Let's talk about the 3 R's of releases, remaster, remakes, and reboots. They've been talked about a lot, so I'll only say a few things. They're not bad on their own. They're a good way to reintroduce those games to those who haven't played it before, and a way to polish those games to modern standards. But the main priority is to make these versions as accurate to the source material as possible. A remaster usually doesn't have that problem. Just spice up the graphics, add more quality of life features, polish the game more, and maybe add an improvement or two while you're at it. But a remake has to do more, because they are literally remaking the game. Literally, that's it. And usually, that's the main point of concern. Even if the remake is a good game, if the remake doesn't accurately represent the source material, well, that's a problem. And a lot of times I just ask, does it even matter? If I never played the original and accuracy is important, should I even play the remake? The thing about all these releases is that while it's a great way to introduce the game to new audiences, a lot of times if you play the release version or the updated version, there's less incentive to play the original ones, most especially if the remakes and remasters are well made, because why should I already play the better version of that game? They are more dependent on technology than any other art form. I could watch a movie released in the 1980s and have a good time. The cinematography might have aged a little bit badly, maybe the technology used might have aged a little bit badly, but I will still have a good time watching it. I could listen to songs released even before I was born and still find value. But video games, they evolved through iteration. Innovations become standard, graphics age, mechanics become outdated, and due to this, video games are tied to the relevancy of the time period that they are in. And sure, there are games that are timeless and relevant for a long period of time, but that's mostly the exception, not the rule. I think video games are stuck as these tech products with the purpose of being an art form, and it can make preservation a pain. And also, do you notice that these games that get this re-release and sequel treatment are only the popular and the notable games, or at the very least games with a sizable fan base? What about the lesser known games or the niche ones? Do we truly care about preserving gaming's history, or do we just care about the preservation of those games that we are nostalgic to so that we can have an escape? The gaming industry is stuck in its past. It is stuck trying to get the same euphoria, the sense of breakthrough, the sense of positivity it had in the previous generations. The audience yearn for nostalgia throwbacks. Corporations supply it and make money off of it, and the cycle continues. It doesn't want to move on and evolve despite the technological advancement it achieved in the past couple of years. It doesn't want to change, even though it technically did. It's a grown man, but mentally a child that doesn't want to grow up. And I'm tired, honestly. I am tired of old men who refuse to grow up to tell me that gaming isn't exactly the way it was when they were naive children who didn't know better. I am tired of people viewing the past with rose-tinted glasses and insult people if they view otherwise because they're so afraid of change. I am tired of infantilized adults ignoring the broader context of the industry to critique it properly. I am tired of people who have this better than you attitude to those who like modern games. And most of all, I'm tired of corporations constantly using nostalgia to cash out, not because of an artistic intent, but for financial incentive, reducing it to just plain pandering with nothing deeper. And I am not saying appealing to nostalgia in media is bad. Some of my favorite artists recently and of all time used tunes and formula that were refined in the 90s and the early 2000s, but we invented it so it will still be fresh while being familiar. Some games use our sense of nostalgia for a deeper experience, but if people are so allergic to change and refuse to move on, no wonder there are so many sequels and re-releases instead of fresh, new, and original stories, and they will keep coming because you will buy them. No wonder Nintendo has no qualms with locking older games behind a shitty paywall. There are a lot of great things and great games that this generation and the past generation have produced, yes, but there are also problems with the industry and it will get worse. But returning to the way it was isn't the solution. Gaming has changed in so many ways that we can't even look at it the same anymore, so we need to move on and improve our present and hope for a better future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, fuck Nintendo.